Well, there's your problem, lady. 2009 VTX1300T. Let's dig right into it. Well, hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning back in. As I said, this is a 2009 VTX1300T. I think that stands for touring. Either that or it stands for tremendously difficult to repair. I don't know, one of the two. I'm gonna go over the story on this, but first, this belongs to an acquaintance. I'm just helping him out. He called me up and said, hey, you know, I know you work on these things, can you help me out? I said, sure. He brought a bunch of parts over, so we're gonna dig into it and see if we can help him out. The main problem, I think, is a fuel problem, but we need to establish some baselines first. So the story is, I don't know how long ago, and I'm gonna mess this up, I'm sure, but how long ago the original owner of this passed away, and it went to somebody else who, in a family, who didn't use it, and it sat for quite a long time. And then it went up for sale. My acquaintance bought it from the widow, and the widow said that they did bring it to a shop somewhere and found that it had a carburation problem. They rebuilt the carb or something, but the shop said that it needed top end work, like engine work, like cylinder head or valves or something, but didn't go into explaining what that was, and nor does my acquaintance really know what that means as far as what they were suggesting was the problem. What he said they allegedly did was they, again, did some tweaking on the carb or something, maybe rebuilding, but he said that they put Marvel mystery oil in the gas tank and in the crankcase, which I don't think is a really good idea on a wet clutch bike like this. We're going to segue into why that's important here in a minute. Those things that he told me kind of raise a red flag, because this is number one, a Honda. I mean, what are the chances this thing's got top end damage? Of course, I'm probably jinxing myself, or top end problems. So we're going to go into that first, and then we're going to go into the carb issues. Now, I showed you a little teaser at the very beginning, like, there's your problem with the carburetor. Let me go get that again and explain what happened with that. It's pretty explainable, and but it is part of the problem that we're dealing with right now, because right now it does not have, obviously, that carburetor on it, but it has a Chinese knockoff, which is a no bueno. Anyway, let's do that. Okay, here's your original Keihin VE7BK. You can tell that's a 7BK because that's what it says right there. And that is the one that is specific for the T. Now, I don't know what the difference is between the Keihin carb, which is pretty much the same body as all the other VTXs of this era, this year, or this range. I don't know. But it does come up as a different part number, and in the service manual, it does show different jetting. So what we've done with this is we've ordered I was going to say aftermarket. We've ordered an original used carburetor, Keihin carburetor, which is actually out in the mailbox right now. I got to go fetch it, but we're a little premature. And what happened with this allegedly was, according to my acquaintance, see, he had this bike shipped. Another bike apparently fell into it on the trailer or in the box truck. However it came down, I don't know. This is a replacement OEM airbox and cover because it smashed all this in, and it did this damage. So pretty explainable. I don't think we need to go into it anymore, but we're probably going to use some stuff out of this, plus some brand new OEM parts he brought over and left with the bike. So we're going to be able to essentially take two carbs, make them one with OEM new parts, and get this thing squared away in that regards. Now, as for the top end issues, and what my friend said was he believes that it's got an engine knock. Now, I'm going to run it for you in a moment here, but one thing I had to do first was I drained all the oil out and I changed the filter. He provided a OEM Honda filter. There was a K&N filter on it, and I've topped off the oil and I've cranked it over before topping it off without two of the spark plugs in. Remember, this has got 4 plugs. And I made sure the oil light went off, and then I topped off the oil to the appropriate level. So it's got brand new oil, and the system is primed. So we're going to crank it over here in a little bit, but and run it, that is. But before we do that, since we got 2 plugs out, I want to run a compression test on it. So we'll do the baseline first. Now, I normally like to do this without any carb on it at all, and we may repeat it in that state. But since I want to run it, I can't do that. So we'll just crank the throttle open like you typically would do, wide open throttle. The spark plugs are disconnected from the other side, but the plugs are still in. So these are the 2 places that we're going to put the compression tester. Let's go ahead and do that now and see what we got. All right, we're gonna do the rear jug first. It's gonna be a little fiddly because I gotta hold the throttle open while I crank it. So let's do that now. You ready? Rear throttle, contact. I said rear throttle, didn't I? Rear cylinder, contact. 160 PSI. Now that's pretty badass. All right, there's nothing wrong with that. So let's go ahead and check the front and do a comparo. All right, now we're hooked up to the front jug. I just love that word, jugs. Wonder why. Let me turn the ignition back on. And again, I gotta fiddle this throttle wide open. Okay, ready? Where's the button? Contact. Yeah, 170, 160, 170 between the two cylinders. I may have misread it the first time. I think it's 165 or so on the first one. Anyway, that's well within 10% because at 160, 16 PSI would be the range. So there's nothing wrong with the compression on this bike. I'd say that we're in really good shape in that area. So what they were talking about, I don't know. And to be honest with you, when I ran it, or when we ran it, after my acquaintance friend dropped it off, I didn't hear any knocking or anything. Now what he said was because it's missing all these bolts, there's a bunch of bolts missing off this back end, which supposedly are in the parts that he provided me. We're gonna get all that squared away as well. He said, well, maybe this back end's rattling. So I don't know if he meant it's knocking when he's riding it, like going down the road, like test riding it, or just sitting there idling, but just sitting there running it before, and I rode it up on the lift. I didn't detect any knocking from the engine at all. But I want you to hear it run with the carburation the way it is right now. It's not terrible, to be honest with you. So let's put the spark plugs back in, hook all the wires up, and then we'll go ahead and fire it up. Okay, now, one thing I didn't mention before was he said something about one of the plugs coming out very oily when he first took them out, when he got this bike. It probably is this one here because that plug hole is it's not cross-threaded at all, but it is a little junked up, and it looks either carbony or something in those threads. Like, I don't know if they put some moly or something, moly grease, or who knows, maybe whoever worked on this thing took it and because it sat so long, and put some Marvel down the cylinders or something, let it sit for a while, and then without the spark plugs in, you know, cranked it around to coat the cylinders and make sure that it wasn't bone dry at first run. I mean, that's not unreasonable. I do that with fogging oil all the time on stuff that's been sitting around. I'm doing a classic reach around here because I can't remember where the key is. I don't even remember where the freaking enricher is. Oh, it's over here. I got it. Nope, that's not it. I swear I need 3 MRIs now. It's been a while since I worked on one of these, so please bear with me. All right, ready? Contact. Choke's off. Put you back here. I don't hear no knocking. I think it sounds just fine. Verified the oil light's out when it's running, and I've got good heat coming to each of the pipes because, you know, you got 1-to-1 on this one. I think there is a mixing pipe here, but it ain't that big. Yeah, there's a connector pipe to, you know, even out the balance of it as far as back pressure goes. But, you know, it feels fine. It sounds fine. Let's hit it up again and see. Let's hit it. and then see what it does. Why can't I remember where that is? Just idle now without any choke or enricher. Sounds great to me. As far as the engine internals go. But it's anemic. It's definitely anemic. And I'm pretty sure that we're dealing with carb problems at this point. I don't believe there's any problem with any engine internal. Maybe it needs, like I said, a valve clearance check or something. But he said when it runs, and I forgot exactly what he said, but he said when it runs, it doesn't run right. Like through the power band, I think it's weak, and maybe it's got a transition problem between low and higher throttle. That's all carburetor. And since it's got an aftermarket Chinese junk carb, which we're fixing to take a look at here in a minute, that's most likely the problem. And we got to deal with, again, putting two carbs into one, rebuilding one, making sure it's right, and then putting it on. We've got we have at least two new carb holders, or at least one, I should say. I'm not sure what we have. I shouldn't say that right now. I know he said he wanted to replace the rubber carb holders, but as you know from watching my videos, being this is a single carb with two cylinders, it's got a manifold in there, and each of the manifold sides where it goes into the cylinder head has a carb holder. Then you have one bigger one, a main one, a single one for the carb itself. That's what I'm trying to say here. I guess the exhaust fumes are starting to confuse me more than I'm normally confused. That's what we're going to focus on right now, because the rest of it I don't see a problem with. I do not hear any knocking, and the engine sounds good, and you saw the compression numbers just as much as I did. So I'm going to pull the tank off camera because I need to get in there anyway, and then we'll pull the air box off. We'll get that carb out of the way, take a look at all the rubbers. I'm going to examine my rubber, and then I'm going to take a look at all the vacuum hoses as well. So we've got some stuff to do. It should be fun, but I don't see any problem with the engine internal, so let's move forward. Tank's off, outer air box is off, the cover, and of course the doohickey. Yeah, the doohickey. You know, that air filter thing that goes in there, that's out of there too. Why don't I just use a nut driver on that now? Doy. And I'm sorry again for the fan. It's November 12th today, and it is still hotter than you know what down here. And the humidity, I mean, it's way above normal for this time of year, especially in the humidity department. It's just ridiculous. Ow! I hit my head. Okay. Oh yeah, I gotta get those out. It is just ridiculously warm. Really sick of it. There's supposed to be a cold front coming tomorrow, so that will be the 13th. And according to what I read, it's like you'll feel a substantial difference in the humidity, like immediate. Well, I hope so, because we had one cold front come down through right after the hurricane, and that really saved our bacon because it was so hot before that. And cleaning up the yard in 95-degree heat with 150,000% humidity doesn't sound very fun to me. Pretty sure I got a hose in here somewhere. Yep, two of them. Stand by. Why are you crooked? There you go. I don't mean crooked like you're thieves, but come on, you. You can do it. There it goes. Nice. Okay, let's take a close-up and personal look at this carburetor here. Up close and personal. Cheap Chinese knockoff piece of junk carb. Don't use it. It's no good. These are junk. Now I will tell you this. I did check this already because I had this off. I had the cover off once. It does shoot a load when you rotate the throttle. So the accelerator pump is working, but whether or not it's working too good or it's jetting's wrong, who knows? I mean, I don't think it's got the stock jetting in it because I got a baggie that's got the two jets in it from the original carb that somebody else did. I don't know. Otherwise, doesn't look too cray-cray. He replaced the throttle cables, which is a very good idea. He replaced the clutch cable, which is also a very good idea. He's actually pretty good on figuring this stuff out in regards to, you know, looking through the fishes and so forth. So I think he's pretty competent when it comes to providing me everything that I need, which is nice. because most of the time I forget shit. So that's just a vent hose. All right, so I think what I want to do is, I don't really know how old the gas is in this thing. He said it's fairly fresh, but it doesn't smell bad. So I'm trying to remember how to do this in what order. I know I've got those two stupid coolant lines up in here that provide carburetor heat, but I don't remember if I took the throttle cables off with it installed or while it's kind of hanging off to the side. I don't remember. So I'm just going to loosen them up for now so I don't have to worry about that later. So let's go ahead and do that. Probably just put you in a time warp for that and we'll get this carb out of the way. Let's go ahead and take a walk. That's what we got. A box. And some mail. What should I take, the mail or the box? Maybe I'll take the whole mail box. Is that why it's called that? Let's wear some gloves, considering I don't know where this carb's been. May have some Famunda cheese on it, you know, Famunda. So, oh wow, look at this. Now this is neat. This sucker has got an adjuster on it. This has got to be aftermarket. I make these out of old speedometer cables. And if you look at some of my old VTX videos, you'll see this. I made it on one or two of them. But I'm pretty sure this is an aftermarket because it looks like it's been made, you know, mass production. And what it is it should be a stock Honda pilot or slow screw. And this drops down below the airbox so you can adjust this in situ, which is virtually impossible to do even with a Motion Pro tool with that airbox on. So this is a nice addition. I didn't even see that on the ad when I went to buy this on eBay. And it's from an 08, which is close enough, VTX1300T, which is what we got. And let's look at the carb number. That is a VE7BK. So it's the same carb, so that's good. A little scratched up here and there from kind of apprentice marks taking it off the bike it came on. But we can definitely do something with this because we've got another carb right here, which I'll show you in this other OEM one. This is the pilot screw in question. I don't know what that hole is. I don't remember these having a hole in it. Someone may have drilled that for some reason, but I don't know, maybe on this one, the Honda uses one that's got a hole in it already, but it is your standard D tool slow screw, again, pilot or slow screw. And it would take that special tool that I have and you've seen me use on other videos. Since we got this is going to be nice. It's a little doity, it's going to need to be gone through, which I'm going to do all off camera. I'm not going to do this on camera. We need to test the throttle positioning sensor. We'll just keep this one on if it's okay. If not, we do have one. It's not on this carb, it's in the box of stuff that came with that carb. I do have another one. And then we'll get this one all set up and ready to go. So let's go ahead and take a look at the carb holders and so forth. We'll go over that real quick. Might as well. Now I always try to put some towels in here. And today I used green. So I guess this video today is brought to you by the color green.
And that's the color we're looking for, green.
We'll get these out of the way for now. And the main reason is if I pull it out and it's hanging from the throttle cables, I don't want to bang it against the fins and scratching them or chipping them or something, so I just take good care. Here's your two cooling lines I was talking about. They'll drip a little bit, but they won't continue to leak, so you don't have to worry about draining the coolant off or anything. I am going to get these out of the way, and then I'm going to plug this up here momentarily, but we'll take a look at this. This is your main manifold like I was talking about, and so you have the manifold that goes into both cylinders. Pretty much on every one of these I've ever worked on, these are always loose. They're never 100% tight because they loosen up over time. And if you have the tank on, you're only doing the carb that way, if that's even possible. I assume it is. You may not be able to see these too well, so I like to take tank off, get out of the way, and then plenty of light, plenty of access, and then you can check these and make sure they're tight. So anyway, yeah, it's pretty simple stuff, but I'm going to go ahead and plug that because I want to concentrate on the carb right now. I'm going to do that off camera, And then when we come back, we'll do something. I'm not sure yet. Fooled ya. Yeah, we'll do a combination of time warp and some actual footage here because you might find this interesting. So at least let's get it torn down. I forgot. We need to disengage the accelerator pump rod from the throttle cam here. I forgot that I needed to do that. So these ancient freaking carb holders or rubber parts are, I gotta be very careful with this, but we gotta get it broke loose and then get a little, let that silicone work its way in there, and then we'll get this off. All right, I eventually got it, but you see, this is why you replace these things. They're really stiff, not supple at all. I'm gonna get that out of the way. If you're gonna pry on it, you just gotta be real careful. I kind of know what I'm doing somewhat, so I'm not going to take this out right now. I'm not sure if we have any parts for this O-rings that's inside here, so it ain't leaking. We're going to leave that alone. It's not going to be a problem going in ultrasonic anyway if we just leave that alone. So as long as we don't have the TPS on there or anything, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to ultrasonic this thing. I mean, the inside's not that bad. It really isn't. You can tell that just by looking at it. And the float pole's not that bad either. So we might not. I mean, I might just blow this out with brake clean. Kind of wipe off the outside a little bit. It's probably the safest thing to do. Let's go ahead. This is an air cut valve, kind of like you see on the Valkyries, but it's internal, which isn't tight. Get off of there. There's a spring in here, so if you're going to take that out, be prepared. Boing. I mean, that's a stiff spring, too. That smells like somebody's butt. Sometimes, you know, on these little covers, by the way, there might be an O-ring on them, so just be careful of that, too. But before we go too much further, let's go ahead and take a look at this air cut valve. Now we know we have another one in the other old carb. It's probably just fine. No, this one looks good too. So we'll just use the best parts out of everything and make one good carb out of it. I'm kind of leaving the float for last because I want to show you something on that. I want to take a look at that in a different way. Now there is this spring is pretty large in diameter, but oh, come on. Yep. This one is screwed up, and you can see there's some plier marks on it where somebody was trying to get that out before, and now it's stuck. Or they, of course, freaking air compressor, or they've taken this out and they couldn't get it out. They tried to get it off, but I can get that out. It'll go. We'll just replace the screw. I happen to know where there's 4 others, actually 8. Slide looks good at first glance. Be real careful taking these out. You don't want to tear them. And on these slides, by the way, sometimes you have a little O-ring up here that lines up to a feature on the cover. In this case, it's just got a little tab that clocks this thing, because this thing's got to go in properly. In other words, it can't go in just haphazardly, because then the slide, the little hole in the bottom of the slide won't be lined up properly. And in this case, when it's improperly, the hole in the slide is toward the intake side. Let's go ahead and take the float out, because the way this thing feels, not too sure about this float needle. Could be an OEM Honda. If that's the case, we may be able to use that up. We use that again. Use it up, use it again. I'm pretty sure I have these, but probably not going to reuse that. I'm pretty sure I got them though, unless they come in a kit that he provided. He did provide a lot of parts. I just haven't sorted them all out yet. But all right, let's get organized. Finish this up. Float looks good, by the way. I mean, it looks really good. This carburetor is really nice. There is no major... Oh no! You thought I was going to say something else, right? I don't see any big problems with this at all. In fact, I don't think it's going to go in the ultrasonic ultimately. I don't believe there's any reason to do that. That's overkill. And so we're just gonna, you can't see it anyway. So make sure we clean it up good as far as degrease it and so forth on the outside. We'll blow the circuits out. There's no reason to run up extra time on this if we don't have to. But let me go over the jets with you here, or the circuits and so forth. So, obviously, this is where your slow screw or pilot screw goes. This is a fixed jet for your enricher, so that would be your enricher jet, but it's pressed in kind of like other ones. Here would be your slow jet or pilot jet. We're going to take that out here in a second. And this, of course, your main jet, and then your port for the or the seat for the float, which looks really well, really good as well. Looks really well is good. MRI time. So let me go get a screwdriver that'll work in this situation. We'll pull that slow out. This main jet, I don't know if that's aftermarket or not. It's a 95. I gotta go look up the stock jetting on this too. All right, that's good. Not overly tight. This is a 55. Slow jet's 55. That's going to be a 7 as well. Maybe the whole thing will come out. Nope, that's okay too. 95. It looks aftermarket though. Usually the Honda jets have a line, or the OEM jets have a line across them, like about a third of the way down from the top. You need a 7 mil wrench for that. So I thought I had. Oh no, I don't. I know where it is. I know where it is. I found it. Is it a 7? Yep. Now this carburetor, this is what I want to point out here. This is really more of an emulsion tube than other carburetors, perhaps. It goes straight up in. There's a needle jet up in here. That's really what that is. That thing penetrating through next to the, well, just past the spigot for the accelerator pump. That's a needle jet. That may or may not come out. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. There it goes. It does come out. So you give them a good push by hand, they're going to come out that way. What holds it in is the main, or this emulsion tube or main jet holder. That end of it right there bottoms into it. So what you do is you carefully do a classic reach in on this, and you put something down inside there. That's why you break it loose first, and then give it a kind of a push. You want to take that out because it's going to fall out and you're going to lose it. Don't ask me how I know. Let me go get something more appropriate for this. There it goes. I just used a Torx tool, but it's much smaller than the inside of that, so it's really only pushing on this blunt edge of it. Doesn't hurt it at all. So there's your needle jet. And it goes back in the same way. It only goes one way, and you see the bottom of that needle jet's got a little radius on it, and that radius matches up to what is like more like a countersink on the end of that. See, that's what holds it in. So there's a shoulders up in there. This holds it in, but it will fall out, and you will lose it in the cleaning process. So if you can't get it out, then don't force it. Don't mess with it. But they'll come out in this situation 99 out of 100 times. Now on the back side of the carb, I only see one air jet. Let's see where it goes to. Goes here, comes out here, goes up there. So that's a main jet or a main circuit air jet. We gotta make sure that's open too. Just doesn't have any more in this particular application. Oh, I know why, because it's got the air cut valve. Yeah, take a look at this. So if we look at the slow circuit here, where we pull that slow jet, and then we follow the circuit down, it comes out here, plug, because that's part of the machining process where they can get in there and drill that hole. Then it comes down here and goes into this air cut valve circuit. So that's where that's getting its air jet side from, is that air cut valve, which makes sense because that's on the low circuit. And then of course, it extends this slow circuit standoff here, if you will, this body for it, goes up forward, heads up here to the standoff, or where the threads are for the slow or pilot screw. And there you go. And let's take a look at the enricher. So the enricher's here. You got that standoff here. It goes down to here. Then it comes out to here. Then it goes up to there. And that's where that enricher plunger goes. So that's how you trace those things and know what they're for. And so we only have to worry about one on the back side here to clean that out. But like I said, I don't think we're going to put this in the ultrasonic. I don't think we will. Let me look at the kit. If we have O-rings for this, we might do that. Take that out and do the whole damn thing in the ultrasonic, but probably not. So I'm not gonna mess with it. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, when I was under time warp, I wanted to show you this outside of time warp. When you got a TPS bike, sometimes you got a little engagement deal. This little thing goes on here, and that's what drives the TPS. So it slips into that slot, so it's just like a little adapter shaft. So you can't lose that either. I remembered that, so as soon as I took TPS off, I secured that. And we're just gonna leave TPS where it's at right now. We'll do some measurements, whatever we can, according to the service manual. All in all, yeah, she looks nice. Nice. All right, so I'm not gonna be able to film all this, so what I'm gonna do is, covered what I really wanted to cover. I'm gonna go ahead and get this carb done off camera completely, cleaning the whole bit, including replacing whatever parts, and I'll just identify that as far as from the other carb that is, when we come back. Because I just can't spend all day on it on camera. I've got to get moving on this particular work to help out my friend. So we may take a look at that and see if we can identify and replace the O-rings. I don't know. So I just want to show you a couple things. This is the completed carburetor with the replacement body I got off of eBay, which cleaned up really well and is in really good shape. So I'm just going to explain briefly how I did this. This is one of the benefits of having a couple of extra carbs to harvest parts from. I mean, if you don't, and you just got to use the ones in here, make sure you put, you know, as much OEM that you can back in these carbs, if not all of it, if you can get a hold of it. For example, the float bowl gasket on this one that I rebuilt for the motorcycle is OEM provided by the owner. And the one that's going to go out here too for the airbox, I have that OEM as well. And I highly recommend that all the time. Now what ended up happening was, this is the one that was, here's your problem, lady. You know, the one that was originally on this bike when he got it because it got smashed up. This is the one that the owner replaced it with, which is a cheap Chinese carburetor. But he had the foresight to do a couple different things. The first thing he did was he took the jets out of this one and put it in this one, because, or at least the main jet, because he knew that it probably needed to be that number, which by the way is a 190. So I couldn't find it at first, and I was looking for a 190. It's 190 and 55 for the slow. So 190 main, 55 for the slower pilot. So I looked, the one that came with this one, which was on there, and there wasn't any main jet. There was only the emulsion tube in here. So I looked around in the parts, and I found a 165 and then a 195, I believe. I looked in my stash and I had a 190, but it's the wrong jet. So I said, oh crap, so what am I going to do? So then I said, let me look inside this one. So I pulled the float bowl off, and there it was. The 190 was on top of the emulsion tube that was in this one. So that 190 is over here where it belongs. As far as the 55 goes, I had that jet, so that just went directly back in here. So we're at stock jetting on the one we're going to use. Sort of. I'll get into that here in a minute. So one thing I wanted to show you that I didn't clarify before, when I originally took this carb apart, remember I took this little cotter pin out to get this float bowl off? That's because I knew I had to go deeper into this than just screwing around with it. You can, this is the aftermarket carb, but it's the same thing. You don't have to do that if you want to take the float bowl off of one of these. That's what that spring is here for. What you do is you can just push against that spring and slide this out of the way. You see, I wanted to highlight that. Just be careful when you put it back on so you don't smash the float. But that allows you to get the float bowl out of the way if you wanted to change a main jet or do something. Now the slides gave me a little bit of trouble as well. It took me a little time to figure this out. Slide needle, actually. So here's an original one that came out of, I think, this carburetor, the one that came from eBay. Because I ended up reusing the slide that came out of this carburetor. It seemed a little bit better. But this is an aftermarket one that came out of this carburetor. But it wasn't in this carburetor. It was in this carburetor. And so I said, well, what the hell?
What the hell?
So I looked inside this carburetor and I found that one that's in this one now. But I looked at the needle that was on that carburetor and it was pretty sure this is an aftermarket because just the way it looks. Apparently he took an aftermarket needle out of a kit or something. I'm thinking, I'm not 100% sure on this. I'm looking for the original needle. Now I looked online and I cannot find any reference to the numbers of it. This slide that came out of that had this needle, which is like a Dynajet or a Factory Pro or something like that. And I'm definitely not using it. And the reason I know it's aftermarket is because the eBay ad said that this came off of a bike that had modifications like exhaust and airbox, I guess, so it was jetted. Jetting on it didn't seem to be too out of the ordinary, but this guy is a no bueno on a slide when I want to go back to OEM. So what I ended up finding was, not inside this carburetor actually had this aftermarket slide and this needle in it. So what I did was I said, I wonder if it's, again, same thing with the main jet, in the aftermarket carb. Take the top off, there you go. I found it and it appears to be the OEM needle. I took the slide out of this one and a needle out of, well, it was in this one, but originally was in this one, and it's all in this one now. So it's kind of like a shell game. A little bit of a shell game going on here. The net sum is that I've got everything in this carburetor, as far as I can tell, 100% OEM. I did make one little change on the slow jet. I read some stuff on the forums. 55 is a little lean for these, and I believe that to be the case from what I remember. And they recommend a 58. I have another 55 here as far as what came out of one of these carbs, so it's no big deal. But I took that 55, punched it out to 58 based on the size, using my little precision gauge pins and a jet reamer. So we're going to try that because I'm pretty sure that's going to work pretty well. But again, the main jet is 190, what it's supposed to have. So essentially this would be an equivalent of 58 and 190. I know what you're going to say. You're going to be like, oh, somebody else works on it. They're going to be, don't worry about it. It's one step. It's not going to make a big hill. A hill of beans worth the difference. So essentially we're going to at least try that. And I'll let the owner know, and if he sells it to somebody, it's up to him to tell him that. And of course we have this really cool aftermarket adjuster for the slow screw, pilot screw. According to the manual, you're supposed to set this at 1 turnout. I put it at 1.5, and we're going to try that. I did not bump the needle up. Sometimes I put a shim underneath the needle. I left that alone because I had made that slow jet change. And everything is really good as far as the diaphragm goes. Feels good, seated up in here. Everything's tight. And the last thing I wanted to cover was, remember I mentioned this, and I wasn't going to put the carb body into the ultrasonic because I was concerned about this piping for the carburetor heat. Well, that comes right out. I didn't even realize it, but it does come right out. And here's one of them from this carb. So essentially you just take this little bracket off that holds it, and you can wiggle this thing out. And if you ever wanted to know what this looks like inside here, if you don't want to take it out, which is really easy actually, sometimes they're a little stuck, but the O-rings are really good because it's not exposed to gas, it's exposed to coolant. There's nothing in there. It's just a dead hole. And what this does is, this little fitting, the coolant as it warms up and gets hot, flows through this and essentially wicks heat into the carburetor to kind of bring the carburetor up to temp. Probably because of airflow, there's a lot of airflow, and maybe they were worried about like carburetor icing or something like that, especially in cold weather. I don't know, but that's what this is for. I know it hooks up to coolant, so you can easily take that out, replace the O-rings if you want, but I looked at this one and the one I put back in here, they were perfectly fine. You just clean the bores out real good, clean this, put it back in, put your bracket in. Only one screw holds it unless the throttle positioning sensor, because that's the other screw that goes in that hole, which segues into, we need to test that now, and then I got to see if that's information's in the service manual, and make sure that the TPS is operating properly. Then we'll put that on with that little connector thing. Then this will be ready to go back on the bike. So a little confusing, but again, you got to play a little bit of a shell game here when you're putting these carbs back together sometimes, and you have to go this one to this one to this one, and rob this part from this one and put it on this one, and then the next thing you know, you got a good carb ready to go, which is what we have here. All right, we'll measure it here in a second, but been experimenting here. This is a potentiometer. It's not a Hall effect sensor, so it doesn't go round and around. So if you take it off, it gets turned. Don't worry about it. Just that little slot inside there, just point that slot basically at this alignment hole, and when that little adapter piece there that it extends it out from the throttle shaft to the TPS rather is installed, it'll go right on over that piece, and that way you won't break it or crush it. And it takes a fairly large screw here, as far as compared to the other ones. This would probably be an M5, and then you just screw it on, and we're going to go ahead and test it. I just want to see a baseline. This is the only test you can do of the TPS itself. Then you have to, if you have a problem, you got to go to the wiring on the bike side and make sure you got the proper voltage. All right, Throttle closed between the red with the yellow and the blue with the green. 4 to 6 kilo ohm. 4.94 kilo ohm. 4 to 6. You can't get much better than that. Now we're going to do another test. This number means nothing at this point. The manual gives no reference for the other wire you need to tap into. You stay on that blue with the green and you move over from the yellow with the red, where we got that 0.4 to 0.6 kilo ohms, in our case 5 kilo ohms, over to the red with the yellow, the middle wire. And again, that number means nothing to us, at least, because they don't give us that number as far as a reference in the manual. All you're doing right now is opening and closing the throttle by hand, and you're seeing whether or not it increases when you open the throttle, and then when you close the throttle it should be decreasing. So once you get to the open throttle position, whatever position of open throttle that is, once you start closing the throttle, the resistance decreases. So we can just go real slow, because this meter doesn't refresh very well. It's kind of a cheap ass meter, but you get an idea that this thing seems to be working pretty good, and there's no flat spots really. Occasionally it'll do like an OL, because I think it's just not catching up fast enough, but if you go nice and slow on this thing, it seems to work pretty good. And then when you close the throttle, it decreases back to where essentially it was on this number here, close to it. Again, this number baseline doesn't mean anything, but it does go up and down or increase and decrease smoothly. That's all you're testing out on this. You know, the Suzukis and the manuals, they give you a little different parameters. They give you a baseline parameter that would be like we did the first two wires, and then you take like 80% or 60% of that, and you go to another wire and then open it wide open throttle, and it should be that parameter. But on Hondas, I've never seen them give any other parameter except that baseline one, which is what this thing already has passed. So I'd say we're good. Let's move on. We'll get it ready to put on the bike. I'm not going to show you how to put this all back in. It's just a reverse of what I showed you in Time Warp on taking it out. It's really not that difficult. And the main problem is getting these dumb freaking coolant lines back on, because they are a little bit problematic because they're not very long. This one and that one, which I have plugged off now because they started to dribble last night. We have a new carb holder, if you will, for the main manifold to the carb. We will be putting that on. And then we'll get this thing put in place. And then I think we can at least run some fuel to it and see how it runs at that point. I think it's going to run a hell of a lot better. But I'm also going to check the exhaust manifold bolts too, make sure that they're tight, the nuts rather, and do a couple other things to make sure that that isn't contributing to any noise. But I want to see how it runs with the carburetor done right. But we're going to have to put all the air box and stuff on really to do that. So, but I can always take it back off if I need to access in here for the valve clearance. So let's go ahead and at least catch up to that, and then we'll see where we're at and what we can do.